Jetzt habe ich einen Interviewpartner, der für mich eigentlich fast die Nummer 1 aller Zeiten wäre, nämlich Derek Shulman. Ihr kennt ihn vielleicht nicht, ich kenne ihn sehr gut. Er ist nämlich der Sänger und Multi-Instrumentalist der Progressiv-Rock-Legenden Gentle Giant. Hello, Derek. How are you?
Hi, Carson. I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good indeed. So at long last, I can ask you all the questions I've always wanted to ask about Gentle Giants.
Okay, as long as it's just that.
It's just that, I promise. Now, I want to, with you, I want to go back to really your childhood, because there are 3 brothers playing loads of instruments. What was the Shulman household like?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, it was about music. My father was a professional musician. He was a dance band leader, but also he loved jazz. He was a trumpeter, and but he also played other instruments. So music was always in the house. It was there 24/7, and instruments were always around. So it was again, it was a household full of music. And when he came home after shows in the late evening or early morning, he'd bring his friends home, and they'd actually jam at home, and play modern jazz, actually, a lot of modern jazz. But it was a household full of music, and that's all I knew.
I suppose you, Phil, and Ray had formal training?
Ray had the most formal training, I would say, because he was actually trained classically on the violin. And in fact, he was scheduled to join the National Youth Orchestra of Great Britain when he was a kid. I could read. I played sax. I could read. Phil not so much, but certainly we had formal training for the most part in our house. Yes, we did. Go ahead.
For a long time, I thought you were from Portsmouth, but you were born in Glasgow, moved to Portsmouth when you were very young. What was the Portsmouth music scene like? I mean, we know London, we know Liverpool, we know Sheffield and Manchester and whatnot, but we never heard about the Portsmouth music scene.
Well, there really wasn't one. I mean, it was really the scene of those days, that when the British music explosion happened. So there was no real Portsmouth scene per se, but there was a South Coast kind of scene where bands like Manfred Mann were from Portsmouth, King Crimson were from Bournemouth. There were bands that were close. They were called the League of Gentlemen at that time. So it wasn't really a scene then. I mean, it was more of a we saw what was happening. We knew what was happening, and we just said, let's put a band together. And that was my first band, of course, Simon Dupree, the Big Sound. We basically, I put my school friends in grammar school together and said, let's start a band. And I recruited my brother Ray, who had never played guitar or anything apart from violin, and he was a rhythm violinist. And I was the lead guitarist and singer. So really, there was no real scene. It was just the early days, the mid '60s, of the pop and beat generation of music happening all over Britain, basically.
So, who were your musical influences?
Ooh, that's interesting. A lot of modern jazz, actually. Because my father was a jazz musician. Certainly, the R&B Motown sound, which we listened to actually most bigger artists in those days would listen to AFM, American Forces Network, based in Germany of all places. And we'd listen to the old soul music and R&B and blues for the African American audience based in Germany. And a lot of kids of my age, including the Beatles, Stones, everyone would listen to that and try and emulate the music they heard on American Forces Network and Radio Luxembourg, of course. But for influences, the soul and R&B, but also jazz and classical, of course, because that was a part of my upbringing as a kid in my household.
Now, you already mentioned Simon Dupree and the Big Sound. I'm wondering, did you record anything before them? Are there any embarrassing recordings that you never want to see the light of day?
You know what? No, nothing was recorded before, but I have some demos of very, very first demos. And in fact, they included my sister, Eve, who is no longer with us, unfortunately. She had an amazing voice. I mean, she was a superb singer, almost like Ella Fitzgerald jazz singer types. And I did a couple of duets with her. And I have it on a old demo. These were the first demos we ever did. So not embarrassing at all. They're actually very emotional and very they have a lot of memories which are important for me and us. And in fact, her ex-husband, they got divorced, became our first manager, and in fact was able to get us a record deal with EMI. This is Simon Dupree, of course.
So it must, as you said, it must be very emotional to have this voice of your sisters preserved forever, really, and always be able to listen to her.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And we sang a couple of songs, and no one apart from myself and my brothers have heard it. It was I Put a Spell on You, and Hit the Road Jack. Mm-hmm. So the old soul and R&B stuff, which is is great stuff. And I was like 15 or 16 at the time. I can't even 15. I'm not sure.
Very rhythmic stuff. I love those two songs, I have to say.
Oh yeah.
Now I have to confront you with a few things that I've read or heard over the years. One was when Simon Dupree and the Big Sound was started, the record company wanted you to be Simon Dupree, the sexy frontman, supported by the band, the Big Sound. Is that true?
Oh yeah. Well, it was yeah. Effectively, yes. I was Simon Dupree. My brother Ray. I mean, has stories about when we were interviewed. He would be asked, "What's it like to have a famous brother?" That was very funny. But yeah, I was Simon Dupree because I was the front guy and I was a singer, and to tell you the truth, I kind of enjoyed it. I mean, I'll be honest with you, but it was a team effort. I mean, really, we were a group. It was a manager more than the record company, but certainly in those days, the front guy was important. So I as opposed to Derek Shulman, I became Simon Dupree with the frills and the hair and everything else.
One of your most successful songs, if not the most successful song, was Kites, of course. And you entered Abbey Road right after the Beatles did Sgt. Pepper, and you were able to use some of those instruments. But rumor has it, you didn't like the song and you sort of took the mickey out of it. Is that true too?
Yes and no. I mean, we were not happy about doing someone else's song. But I think we saw there was potential. But we did it reluctantly, honestly. Our manager said, "Look, this may work," and we did it. And it for the first or second week, it entered the top 20. So it was a complete surprise to us. And in certain respects, it was fantastic news. On the other side of the coin, it became a millstone around our necks because it became the big hit that everyone we had a couple of other hits after that, but there was a big hit that people wanted to hear, and that became something that when we toured, we played different kind of circuits, and eventually you'd end up like everyone else did. It was called the Scampi and Chip circuit, where people would be eating their French fries and waiting for you to play the big hits, and meanwhile they weren't even interested in music. And that was kind of the nail in the coffin as far as I was concerned. So that's why we said, although we played to a lot of people and we were still popular, but that part of being a pop band was really kind of like the worst thing that happened to us, and best thing and worst thing. So that was the sort of the issue that made us say, we're going to break up and do something completely different and put Gentle Giant together.
Before we get to that, one last question on Simon Dupree. Recently, news made the rounds that you gave a demo recording, the one of I'm Going Home, back to Elton John, that he had completely forgotten about. And for a while he played with Simon Dupree, filling in, as it were. Was there ever a chance of him joining the band full time? He was featured on a few songs, I'm Going Home and Give It All Back and stuff.
Actually, yes, believe it or not, when myself and Ray, he was in the group for a period of time, well, towards the end. He was our keyboard player. And when we told him, I mean, we became a close friend. Bernie and him met at the same time as we met. He actually said that it was a great idea to do something different. Could he audition for the band? And we said, okay, Reg. His name was Reg, not Elton. So we went up to Watford or I can't remember where he lived in North London, and him and Bernie, they started playing things like Your Song, Skyline Pigeon, etc. And we said, man, they're great, but that's not what we want to do. And so we kind of said, hey, Reg, it's not going to work. Thank God for him, because a year later he became Elton John and became massive, and we were struggling to even get a gig. So yeah, he wanted to be part of it, but thankfully for him, it didn't work.
Was he heartbroken that you didn't want him to join eventually? And have you given him the demo back already?
Oh no, he actually, well, he wasn't heartbroken. I mean, he was he was very talented. But I have to say though, when he said I'm changing my name to Elton John, we just cracked up. We said that'll never work. So what do I know about that stuff? But we saw him. We saw him the beginning of the year before, I said, Elton, I've got a couple of things you may have forgotten. Simon Dupree had recorded a couple of songs, the one you said, which is I'm Going Home, and he didn't have his version. And I said, I've got your version here as well. So he was really happy to have it in his repertoire again. I said, you should re-record this, because it's a damn great song. It's a really good Elton John song. So it was fun. It was fun to see him again, and he's in great shape.
And of course, we know that he's a massive record collector. If anybody in the rock music community is a record collector, then it's him.
Oh, yeah.
You already said, okay, the pop stuff had to go and you wanted to do something completely different. Why did you want to do what you did eventually with Gentle Giant? You could have gone in any direction, really.
Well, yes, we could have. But this is a whole period of time when it was almost like everyone was doing something. Everyone was doing something. It wasn't just our band. I mean, the bands like the Band of Joy and the Yardbirds were getting into Led Zeppelin. Deep Purple were evolving. I mean, the League of Gentlemen were evolving into King Crimson, and we wanted to get better musically. We wanted other people around us. This is the brothers to get us better, and to experiment, I guess is the word. Experiment with what we knew and what kind of music we're influenced by. And we were very, very lucky in the respect that we were, number one, helped by our manager, who of Simon Dupree. When we said we break up, we wanted to start something new, he basically bankrolled the group for a period of 6 months to 9 months to find other players who wanted to do the same thing, which is experiment with whatever music there was and make something new and make something unique, make something authentic. Who knew if it would work or not? We didn't know, but we were very fortunate that we had that. And at the same time, we were very fortunate that we found Kerry Minier, who just graduated from the Royal Academy of Music in composition. And Kerry was just an incredible find, an incredible person, and an amazing composer. And then we found Gary Green after many, many, hundreds of auditions. And he was probably the first guitarist basically to say, can I tune up? And then, other people would come in. And so we were lucky to find excellent musicians that could push us, and also we could push them to do things that were different, I guess. And we all came from different backgrounds. So that's what Gentle Giant came about. That's how it came about. We went through a couple of drummers, of course, and then ended up with John Weathers, who was the key lock-in factor ultimately from Octopus onwards. But that's the story in a nutshell.
So did you, I remember reading in a rock lexicon when I was like 15, 16 or so, the best description about you, the Chamber Orchestra of Rock Music. That's what you were called. Did you plan to use all these instruments that you eventually used, or did that just happen, as they say, organically?
The latter, I think. It was organic. It was something that we could play. I mean, you know, everyone could play. Everyone was a multi-instrumentalist. And we figured if we could do that, if we could play, you know, I could play bass, I could play guitar, I could play, you know, alto, et cetera, and so could the other players. I mean, Kerry is an incredible percussionist, you know, as well as a keyboard player. I mean, we all could play different instruments. So we figured, you know what, why not? You know, we featured that both on recorded music, but certainly live. It was fun. It was fun to switch around because it was always surprising and also fun for us to do, and we enjoyed, you know, having the audience see us do different things because again our music supposedly was, people say complex. I don't think it was, but apparently it was. But also we enjoyed. We had fun doing it, and we smiled and had fun. We wanted the audience to have fun and not be sitting there, as you said, like a chamber orchestra. We wanted to show them we were a rock band, but we were a rock band that could do different things that perhaps other, you know, three guitars, a singer and drummer couldn't do.
Oh, you have brought a smile to my face multiple times, let me tell you, over years and decades, actually. You mentioned some instruments. The funniest instrument Gentle Giant ever used was the Shulbury, the 3-stringed ukulele. How did you think of that one?
Well, it was really an emulation of, I think it was on Playing the Game for The Power and the Glory. And that effectively, the sound of the recorded Playing the Game was Ray hitting the violin, open string violin, and with a 4-string, actually. Well, it was 3-string, but it was, and the xylophone. And we said, how can we emulate that? And basically the roadies put together a plank of wood and a pickup, and that's what it became. There was no brain science or rocket science to it. It was tuned to the violin tuning and open tuning, and that became the Shulbury.
There's one question which to me is a bit embarrassing, having been a Gentle Giant fan for so long, because I never knew why the name Gentle Giant. You have to explain it to me, please.
Well, it's not something which is it's a very easy thing to say. We were given the name by our first manager. He came down to the rehearsals. As I said, they bankrolled us effectively, and he said, "Well, you're pretty heavy, but you also play very interesting, you know, light, very sort of orchestral stuff. So it's gentle and it's giant. So Gentle Giant. What do you think?" We said, "You're paying for it. That's fine."
A while ago, I interviewed Mike Keneally. And of course, we talked about Gentle Giant because he is known to be a mega fan. And we talked about the one song that we would play to somebody to show who Gentle Giant were. And we both feel it's the live version of Octopus Boys in the Band from Playing the Fool. Would you agree with that? Or would you take another song to show who Gentle Giant really were?
Yeah, the live Octopus, the sort of medley is probably a good example, because that's, a live thing for the band. Was the live show was important. I mean, if you saw us, you'd see that we didn't play the songs as the recorded records. We embellished, we strung them out, we did different things, and it was like, I've said this before, and if I repeat myself, please forgive me, that, you know, the recorded music was like a sketch for the painting, which was a stage show. So yeah, it's probably a good starting point. But certainly, I think, you know, the probably the couple of albums which I think are more as indicative of the mature band would be The Power and the Glory and Freehand. I think we were at our best during that period of time.
Freehand is the one that I came on board with. I think before that I had In a Glass House, but when I saw that one concert on German TV, I think Freehand was the next one. So that holds a very special place in my heart. And I'll get to that in a minute because that's the current one that Steven Wilson has remixed. Now, you talked about the live stuff, and it's often been said Gentle Giant were at their best when they played live. Is there a studio album that you think would actually capture the spirit of Gentle Giant well?
That's an interesting question. I think Freehand. I actually think Freehand is probably the where we were happiest, we were most mature, and we were doing very well. I mean, you know, live wise, we were headlining pretty big, you know, places all over, you know, Europe and North America, and it was the memories of recording that album at Advision were very, very positive. You know, we had a lot of good positive vibes, you know, it was we wrote the album in a fairly I'm getting calls on the other line. Sorry about this. No, we wrote the album in a fairly quick period of time, but it was very focused, and we recorded it in about four weeks and mixed it in a couple of weeks. So yeah, it was a bit. We were at our best. I think we were at our most mature and at our best for that album. You know, around that period of time, those couple of years.
I have to confront you with something that really concerns you. Being the front man, you were never lost for words on stage, as we know from bootlegs, from YouTube videos and whatnot. And one thing that I've always found is that very often, more often than not, you were quite open and somewhat even cynical on stage about Gentle Giant not really getting their fair shake. How much did that annoy you? What should have been done differently?
Well, you know, honestly, to tell you the truth, nothing could have been done differently. The truth is that we were who we were. We were a band that pleased ourselves first, and that's probably the best news and the worst news, if you like, because we were pretty selfish. We were cocooned in Portsmouth, and we pushed ourselves to be better for each other first, and then we pushed ourselves on stage to be good for an audience. And if the audience enjoyed it, that was fine by us. What we didn't consider was the commerciality of the band, and therefore, you know, when other bands of our ilk that were tagged into the so-called what progressive world meant suddenly became, you know, went from like the 3,000 to 5,000 seaters to the 10,000 to 20,000 seaters because they had a big hit on the radio. We never could. And honestly, in certain respects, when I think towards the end, we said, let's give it a try. Let's try and make it a little more, to use the word, accessible. I think we almost, it's this weird thing to admit, but almost had a kind of a self-defeating thing, because I don't think the band could have stood being a commercial band. So it was not the right thing for the band. So really, we didn't want to do Odor of a Lonely Heart or whatever, you know, ELP came up with, or you know, we couldn't do it. And so therefore, you know, thinking back and thinking that we were a little, you know, upset that we weren't getting the plaudits other bands of our ilk were getting. It was probably dumb, because we never could. And there's no way that we should have, and I'm happy that we didn't, in fact, in certain respects, on reflection.
So are all the Gentle Giant fans, of course, to this very day. Have you got a favorite Gentle Giant song, a favorite Gentle Giant LP, and is there a record you wish you hadn't done?
No, I don't. To take your last point first, I don't think there's a record that we wish we hadn't done, because as a band, you have to. Progressive means to progress, and if you progress and you take a left turn instead of a right turn, okay, you come back and get back on your tracks and do it the way that it should have been done. So I think, you know, there's a couple of songs, honestly, that perhaps, you know, they were jokes, but they weren't considered jokes, and I probably, I don't regret anything, but I don't think that we should have done them. But as far as the best song, I think actually there's a couple that I like personally, or three. Okay, I'll give you three. The first one is Knots, because it says a lot about Kerry's incredible writing. It also says a lot about the band's ability to sing together, play together, and do it right that people wouldn't expect. I mean, it's a very unusual track that I don't think too many people can emulate or think about emulating. So I'm very proud of that track. The second one's Proclamation.
Oh, yes.
From The Power and the Glory. It has, again, it has a maturity. It has, it also tells a story, which lyrically is important. And it rocks like hell. And the third is going to surprise a lot of people, because this album is kind of like, is kind of frowned upon to a certain degree, is Inside Out on Civilian.
Lovely song.
I think, you know, when I listened to that album, you know, it was a hard album to make for the band. It was done in California, which is, you know, really out of our wheelhouse for everything. The band was uncomfortable. It was towards the end when we weren't sure what was going on. But the album itself turned out, I think, really, really well, and is kind of undersung by a lot of fans. But I think if you listen to the song Inside Out, it's got so much passion and emotion, and boy, you know, if there was no chance of continuing, but had we continued, I think that song would have been in the top 5 of our songs that we'd continue with. But I'm glad we didn't. But you know, if you're asking me favorite songs, that would be one of the top 3 or 4.
Absolutely. I think it's got this heaviness and a certain melancholia, sentimentality, which I think appeals to Germans a lot, because we are that way. I love that song to death. I really do. The slowness of it all. Yes, I totally agree with you. You mentioned that you worked very quickly on Freehand. John Weathers recently said that. He said that if you didn't get a backing track done in like 3 days, you would just abandon the song and try it again later. Was that the general way of working for you? Did you work fast in the studio in general?
Yes, we did, because what we did was do a lot of rehearsals first. You know, we were a hardworking band. I mean, we didn't. Let's put it this way: we didn't go into a rehearsal or the studio and just jam. I mean, that's something that was so far from our, you know, our existence. We you know, as you mentioned before about being, you know, being musicians. There was a lot of scoring. There was real scoring going on. There was real, you know, things were worked out beforehand. So we worked hard in rehearsal. But we gave latitude, of course, when there was a solo to Gary or Kerry or whoever it was. But yeah, when we went to the studio, we wanted to feel live, so we actually go into the studio after rehearsals and play the song live as a band, but just capture the drums and perhaps the bass. And if you caught it in the first 1 or 2 tracks, you had it. But if you continue to sort of like, oh, let's get that right, then it became a little stale. So we just said, we'd give it up and say, let's go out for a drink and loosen up, or not even go there and come back to it when it felt live again, because it had to feel live. And the whole band played on every track initially, and then we scrapped the vocals, scrapped the guitars, etc., and kept the live feel of the rhythm section.
You just said vocals. Lyric-wise, there's a lot of politics and socio-politics going on in the Gentle Giant lyrics. Did you think that the lyrics kind of went a little under in view of the complicated music and a lot of people concentrating on the music?
To a degree, but I think that when Phil was doing lyrics with me together, Phil was much more literary oriented. I mean, he was an incredible reader and bring things that are literary oriented to the band. I mean, the whole Gargantua, the Rabelaisian stuff was more Phil than me. But when Phil left, I kind of took on the mantle of all the lyrics effectively and some of the music. I wanted to talk. I wanted to speak about things that were a little more abstract, or something that was meaningful to more people. That I mean, obviously it was no Moon and Jude stuff, but certainly a little more meaningful in a political way, if you like. Certainly The Power and the Glory. If you listen to that, that's all about the corruption of power, and is based on what we were living through at that point, which is Richard Nixon. And that's it speaks well today about what's happening in this world.
That's right. Yes. And now we come to what some fans call the dark ages of Gentle Giant. You know what I'm talking about. You already mentioned Civilian. Some people say, well, Gentle Giant, from Missing Peas, Giant for a Day, and then Civilian kind of went downhill. What do you tell those people?
Well, I will say to them that you can't expect the band, or you can think what you want, but again, the band has to progress. I mean, every band has to try something new, because if you do the same album all over again and again and again, it gets old. So things around us will influence us. Whether it's politics, music, and or other bands having hit records. Like as I explained earlier, towards the end we saw Yes and Genesis have hit songs, so we said, let's give it a shot, and we tried to give it a shot, but thankfully it didn't work. We gave it a shot, but we shot ourselves in the foot.
Well, I have to tell you though, I like these albums. They are lighter, that's true. More commercial if you want, but they are just great rock songs. I just love them. And is that what Betcha Thought We Couldn't Do It is about?
That was really a song about the punk movement and the punk movement poo-pooing the old farts who were on the road, and really it was a spoof. I mean, if people thought it was a serious attempt at a Gentle Giant song, no, it was a joke. I mean, we should have said probably some lyrical content that should have amended that said that in fact what it was. But certainly yes, we did try to be a little more commercial. Were we able to? No. And as I said before, in retrospect, it was better that we weren't, because what I and I think the rest of the guys would hate and would have hated is being a parody of what we used to do. And I've seen it on many occasions. These bands that rehash what they did when they were kids, and to progress as a person, as a musician, as a society, you have to progress. So our progression was one that said, okay, the Missing Piece. I think there's some parts of Missing Piece is actually very good. I mean, some parts, they're a little more commercial, but they're not that bad. They're still different. But perhaps Giant for a Day was an attempt to be a little more accessible. Commercial, I won't use the word, but I think we got back on track with Civilian in a different way. But at that time, we knew it was time to close shop. And part of the reason was that when we had a tour planned for North America, it really felt like we were clocking in. We were clocking in our job, our card to do our job. And when you're a creative person and it feels like a job, that's the time to say, let's stop, and not milk it and play just because it's going to pay your rent. No, that doesn't work for any of us.
Do you still play music?
Yeah, of course.
Would you still think about recording just for the heck of it?
I do. We all do. Yeah, for me.
Oh, all right. But you wouldn't put anything out?
No.
Okay.
No.
Now, this brings us to the third phase, which is you, the record company man, and some of the releases that we've seen over the past few years, because Gentle Giant have become so much of a going concern again. Like, for example, the massive 29 CD set Unburied Treasures. I suppose all 3,000 copies have sold out?
It's sold out in pre-order, which is bizarre. It's amazing. Actually, it's amazing to me. And very heartening, actually, that here we are in 2021 speaking about something that was over 41 years ago. And it says a lot, I think, about the band. It says a lot about the authenticity of what we were. I could talk about that because I had to deal with the other side of the business for many years. I still do, of course. But it speaks a volume about what lasts and what doesn't last. So it's interesting. Yeah. So Unburied Treasure was sold out, and it apparently this freehand is being snapped up by tons as well, which is interesting.
There's a lot of live stuff on Unburied Treasures. Did fans supply a lot of that stuff?
Yeah, a lot of fans really did. There's a ton of bootlegs out there. There's a ton of fan, radio station stuff, and they all contributed to having this incredible box set. And the people at Snapper, Ian, and those guys did a fantastic job on that. To tell you the truth, we could have sold a lot more, but there was only a limited amount, and to do more would have been, again, milking it. One thing that I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound pompous, it's going to sound pretentious, but I hope this isn't the case. We did it for the music. We really did it for the music. It was important to be paid, to be able to put bread on the table, to make a living. But the most important thing for the band was making music, not just do it because it paid the rent and you could have a lifestyle that was a rock stars. So,
I mean, everybody who knows Gentle Giant knows that you did it for the music. Otherwise, you would have become commercial.
Well, that's correct as well. But also, having seen and been involved in the business after Gentle Giant, what I would hate to be, and what I, perhaps people think I am, but would be a parody of myself when I was a kid. Because that's something that you don't want to live in the past. And to a certain degree, these re-releases, there's elements of that, but there's not, because they're done by Stephen, who's a fan, and he's giving a touch to it that has a new audience. And my son, actually, Noah, has been very instrumental he works for Sony, but he said, look, he never saw us live. He just knew me as a record executive, but he loves what he saw, and he said, let me help, with the social media world, and that's what he does for Sony. And I guess the audience has grown, and the interesting thing for me and for us is that there's a whole new audience out there discovering the band who weren't even born when we were around.
Now, you've given me two things. One is Noah, who did On Reflection 2020, the video, which has been, I think, awarded an award by Prog magazine. How proud of you are you of him, and how well has it come out?
Oh, I think it's superb. Really, really superb. And honestly, he did an incredible job, but so did the musicians, all the fans and musicians on that, and who submitted, did a superb job. I felt badly for Ray, my brother, because he put the visuals together, but he gave Ray 101 tracks to mix. And Ray does that as a living for other people. So, but it came out, I think it came out really, really well. And it was very joyful because it was during a period when everyone was locked down last year, when COVID was rampant. And I think for musicians that like the band, or if people just wanted to see happiness in music and music influencing your emotional state, it was a fun and nice thing to do. I'm very proud of Noah.
And it was a fun and nice thing to watch, particularly to see the joy in the faces of the original Gentle Giant band. We see the Shulbury, we see a lot of laughing, we see some earnest faces, we see a Lee Pomeroy who's just having a bloody ball. And I love this video. Tell Noah to make more, please. And tell Ray to mix them all. Next time he can take 200. He's now got the 100 and something done.
Again, I think we did it. It was the right time, the right place. My son actually, he's actually done 2 or 3 illustrations on the 5.1 for freehand, and just the same. Apparently, it's getting a lot of awards already. So you'll see that on the 5.1. It's actually superb. That's what he does for a living, of course. But I'm proud of both my kids. They're very artistic, and again, I'm happy that he's taken Gentle Giant under his wing. He's become my manager.
Now, you already touched on Steven Wilson. We have to talk about this. He's done a few CDs, and he will do more, from what we've heard. Interview being one of them. That was already talked about in a video I saw on YouTube. I think this is the 5th version of Freehand that I have on CD. Is this the definitive version?
Yeah, actually, if you hear it, if you haven't heard it, it's really, really very well done. One thing that he's able to have given this album is space. There's some the parts of the album is a great album. I like the album a lot. It's a great album, but it was mixed, in the old days of analog, and sometimes space between the parts were kind of you couldn't really. They weren't blurred, but they weren't as defined. So on this mix, you could hear the different instrumentation much more clearly. Yeah. And he's lifted certain parts of the different kind of instrumentation, but certainly they're much clearer, cleaner, and probably rockier and less, much more defined. I'm very happy about this mix.
I've heard the version, and I have to say the two things that struck me more than any other. I mean, the whole sound is different, but I think he got rid of some hiss, and exactly. the drums and the percussion have benefited tremendously from his mix. Would you agree?
Exactly that. 100%. Yeah, the percussion and certainly the rhythm section, you could hear really come through on this album. Yeah, correct. The hiss is gone as well, as you're right. Yeah.
And of course, we get loads of mixes. I wrote them down because I can't even remember them all the time. There's the 2021 mix, the Dolby Atmos mixes, the album mixes, instrumental mixes, original 1975 mix, and the original 1975 quad mix. Have you got a favorite mix? What is it?
I just like the album. any mix. I like the album. I really do. I think it's probably one of. It's my favorite of ours, actually.
But let's go back to 1975 when the album came out. Obviously, it was a bit of a difficult time. John Weathers also mentioned it in that video. You got new management. What was wrong?
Well, we were free of the old management, and that's why it was called Freehand. We had management issues, we had record company issues, and well, we weren't getting our share. So effectively, we changed things around so that we were getting our fair share. The musicians, back in those days, you signed a contract and you look at it afterwards. Or I'd look at it afterwards and say, I didn't sign anything. Did I sign something that was get 1% off or so? So we were able to negotiate a better deal for whatever we did, and certainly the management also was able to get us much better gigs, and as you said, we as I explained, we were playing fairly big places at that point, in North America and Europe. We were in Montreal. We played 30,000 seaters. I mean, it's interesting that that a lot of people don't realize that we were a kind of a cult band, I guess, but certainly a big cult. It's in a certain respects, and it's interesting to see that a younger generation understanding what that meant and what that was.
I have to ask you this. You did put out Playing the Fool, which I think is not just me, but a lot of people think so. Comes, of course, from the age of the double live album, the 70s. Will that also get the Steven Wilson treatment?
Something we're talking about. We haven't. Yeah, he hasn't done it yet. He's, truth be told, full disclosure, he has done the interview. He has done the missing piece. But certainly, I think that could use Steven's touch again. Yeah, it could. But we'll get into that at some point.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading about how you were very progressive in recording, not just recording the band, but also putting atmospheric ambient microphones on stage to create that particular live sound. It was all over the music papers when the record came out. I remember it very, very well. And I wonder what it's going to sound like. I'm sure it's going to be great. Last point that I want to talk about is you, the record company executive. You work with Polygram, with Atco, Roadrunner Records. You had your own companies, DRT, and now 2+ Music and Entertainment. I think the first band that I heard you do was the Sundays, if I'm not totally mistaken. And you did Dream Theater and Tears of Fears and what else? How and why did you jump from behind the mic to behind the desk?
Well, let me just correct you there. Ray, my brother, was the producer of the Sundays.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I knew. I knew something was wrong there. Yes,
and he also produced Bjork's band.
Sugar Cubes.
Sugar Cubes. Thank you. He did Birthday. That was his. But Ray realized in a short period of time he hated working with musicians.
Really?
Because because he is one, and we know what we're like. We blame everyone else but ourselves. But you asked me a question, so I went from. Well, I learned in certain respects on the road about why again freehand and having more of a freehand in seeing what the business meant. I mean, how much is a promoter getting? How much is this getting? And able to get a better deal for the group. When the band disbanded, I was honestly, I had no plan, but I got a call from a friend in New York. I was living in LA actually at the time, and he said, "Have you ever thought about working for a record company?" I said, "Not a chance. Are you kidding? It's the enemy. I mean, it's the Darth Vader of the world." But I didn't have a plan afoot, and I didn't really want to go sell vacuum cleaners at in Best Buy. So I went to meet the guy who was hiring in New York, and I knew a couple of people that were important in the business, and I got hired. So I went to New York, and I just remember the very first day at Polygram, I went in there the first day, and I went to meet all the people, and I realized in the first day that it wasn't about. I don't want to be. It wasn't. It certainly was about the music. There was a lot of music fans, but every office had their own agenda. Everyone was the president, and I realized that if you didn't have all that team behind you, you were never going to make it. And that goes for every musician, any band musician out there. So, I was able to sort of understand that quite quickly. And, I got involved in signing. So I was lucky enough to find, I had a good instinct. I realized I had a good instinct for commerciality, as well as understanding how to work inside as well as outside the company. So I signed Bon Jovi. I signed Cinderella, I signed Kingdom Come, I brought Tears for Fears at the Polygram time, Kingdom Come, Men Without Hats. And then I got an offer to run a record company at Atco, which was fantastic for about 4 or 5 years. And then, because we signed some great bands, Pantera, Dream Theater, and AC/DC off the, band. I've got some, lots of gold records. But honestly, towards the end of that period, I realized that I was, I looked at myself, and this is, another, kind of like a emotional moment, if you like. And I realized that the music itself for me at that point, being a president and CEO, was becoming secondary for the profits. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was wearing a suit. I was going into the office. And I remember one thing in particular, my general manager sitting there in a meeting, and I'd hear something on the radio. And I said, I like that. I know this song. What is that? And he looked at me and he said, you're joking, right? I said, no, I'm not joking. What is it? He said, it's our record. It's a #1. I realized then that this is wrong. I lost what I did it for in the first go round. I lost what I was when I was a kid. I lost my perception of myself as a musician, and that was the point where I said, okay, I'm not going to do this. And effectively, I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I was president, but anyway, that's an interesting story. So I had to sort of regain my footing, and I went back to run Roadrunner, which is a much more indie company, and it was owned by a guy in Holland. And we had a lot of fun breaking that company from nothing to being a very big company with Nickelback and Slipknot, et cetera, et cetera. But I remember being a big part of a whole a corporation, and realizing myself that, again, this is not who I am.
But there are a lot of people that say there are too few musicians in executive positions, but really businessmen. Is that true?
Yes, actually, but it's very difficult to balance. Honestly, it's because you have a love of the music and the musicians, but then but it's all about right now. It's all about TikTok, 5 seconds. It's all about the hook, the chorus. It's not about music. It's not about musicians. So I wouldn't fit in a billion years anywhere right now. This is not my work. Although I do like. And I'm quite enamored, and I haven't been, but recently, by the hip hop world, because
a lot of people say that, yes,
because that's the most progressive music that's out there. They combine all sorts of crazy stuff and riffs, and the interesting thing for me to know is that the hip hop world is quite reverential to some of the best progressive bands. I mentioned the song "Knots" again. We just had a gold record on the wall with a band called Run the Jewels, sampled Knots, and it became a big hit. And it was the lead track on Black Panther, the movie. And the guys are big fans of Gentle Giant. And the hip hop world are big fans of progressive music. I mean, what was it? Was it Kanye that had the big hit with Crimson? So that world are the biggest fans of progressive music out there, and they're progressive.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes, I would have. I had my reservations towards hip hop, being an old rock and prog rock and what have you fan. But I have to say, when there was the first like rap and scratch stuff, Grandmaster Flash and what have you in the late 70s. So there was a lot of great stuff. And then there was some stuff which I thought was a bit
It went through a period
diluted.
of, it went through a period of time of being commercial.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting world, and it's a world where the world where they have reverence for really good musicians, which is good.
Yeah. So what do you do with 2+ Music and Entertainment?
Right now well, last year was not too much because everything was on hold, but I oversee some artists. I'm overseeing a couple of other companies, but I'm really kind of like not getting too into daily routines. I'm too old for that stuff. I don't want to run companies. Just having fun and hopefully finding another group or two that deserves to be heard. I don't know about big, but heard, and helping them. Really, that's all I do. And booking a few. My friends. I mean, I have a lot of friends out there that sometimes would ask for advice or help or whatever. I'll give it to them.
I shall keep my eyes and ears peeled, as I'm sure many other people will be too. Very last question. Have you got like a message from your vast experience as a musician, as a record company executive? Have you got a message to our listeners, the listeners of our radio station?
Yeah, actually, I do. The fact that I'm talking to you about me as a musician rather than me as 40 years as an executive says a great deal. And as a musician in Gentle Giant, we didn't listen to anyone else. We were never followers. So I would say to anyone, be authentic. Be who you are. Don't follow. Be who you are. And if you're really good, you're really, really good, you can make it. But don't follow. Be a leader.
And don't try to be Gentle Giant, because they are a one-of-a-kind band. That comes from my heart.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Derek, thank you so very much for making a dream come true and granting us this interview. I wish you all the very best. A lot of fun. Please say hi to the guys and everyone. And
I will.
Maybe we can do that again when we have all the other things and many unforeseen things. We never know.
Okay, I'd love to.
Thank you very much. Have a great one. Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.